Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
ಗವಿಸಿದ್ದ
ಸರ್ ಹೇಳಿ ಸರ್.
57 ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ.
ಬರ್ತಿದಾರೆ ಸರ್, ಇನ್ನು ಬರ್ತಿದಾರೆ.
ಅದೇ ಅಡ್ಮಿಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂತ ಇರಿ.
ಆಯ್ತು ಸರ್, ಆಯ್ತು
ಒಂದ್ 2 ನಿಮಿಷ ವೇಟ್ ಮಾಡನ್ವಾ?
ಆಯ್ತು ಸರ್, ಒಂದ್ 2 ನಿಮಿಷ.
ಊಟ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರಾ? ಇನ್ನ ಇಲ್ವಾ?
ಸರ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್, 1 ಗಂಟೆಗೆ ಸರ್.
ಮತ್ತೆ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಇದೆಯಾ? ಬೇರೆ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಇದೆ ಇವತ್ತು?
2:15 ಇಂದ ಇದೆ ಸರ್.
2:15 ಇದೆ.
2:15 ಇಂದ ಇದೆ ಸರ್.
ಹೌದಾ? ಓಕೆ, ನಾನು ಒಂದು ಹಾಫ್ ಅನ್ ಅವರ್ ತಗೊಂತೀನಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಹಲೋ, ಒಂದು ಹಾಫ್ ಅನ್ ಅವರ್ ತಗೊಂತೀನಿ ಇವತ್ತು.
ಆಯ್ತು ಸರ್.
56 ಆಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ.
ಆಯ್ತು ಸರ್.
ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಲ್ವಾ?
ಹಾ ಸರ್, ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಡಿ ಸರ್.
ಓಕೆ, ಗವಿಸಿದ್ದ ಅಟೆಂಡೆನ್ಸ್ ನೀನೇ ತಗೋದನ್ನ. ಗವಿಸಿದ್ದ
ನಾನೇ ತಗೊಂತೀನಿ ಸರ್.
ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ
ಸರ್, ನಾನೇ ತಗೊಂತೀನಿ ಸರ್.
ಓಕೆನಪ್ಪ. ಓಕೆ, ಗುಡ್ ಆಫ್ಟರ್ನೂನ್ ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್. in online class, this is the third class.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. In first class we have discussed the importance of the constitution, and second chapter we have discussed the constitutional provisions for downtrodden, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, minorities, women and children and backward classes, right? And today this is the third chapter, which deals about union executive. It's one of the important chapter. Union executive consists President of India, Vice President of India, Prime Minister, Council of Ministers, and their powers and functions. The entire system is called Union Executive. The working system of central government and its methodology is known as Union Executive. We have President of India, who is the head of the Union, but the Prime Minister is head of the government. President has to abide by the decision taken by the Council of Ministers, headed by the Prime Minister. Okay. Coming to let us understand how the President and how the President is elected. What are his powers and functions? We will discuss. Okay. The President of India. The President is elected by indirect method. This means Indian citizens do not vote directly as in case of America. It is elected representatives who vote and elect president. So that means to say, in India we will not elect president directly. We elect the representatives. In turn, these representatives elect the President of India. That is why we will call it is an indirect method. Whereas in America, the President of America is elected by all the citizens of America. Okay, here it's indirect method. That means we elect the representatives. Elected representatives in turn elect the President India. That is why we will call it as a indirect method. Okay, let us see overall involved in electing the President of India. That is called the Electoral College to vote for presidential election consists of number 1, elected members of both house of parliament. Elected members of both house of parliament. That means the elected representatives of both MPs and Rajya Sabha members, Lok Sabha members as well as Rajya Sabha members. Number 1. Number 2, elected members of the state legislature. Elected members of the state legislature. Here, the state like Vidhan Sabha, the MLS and MLCs. MLAs and MLCs. The both legislator means both MLAs and MLCs of the states. And third one is elected members of the legislatures of union territories. As you know that we have states as well as union territories. There are few union territories, and elected representatives of the union territories also involve in electing the President of India. That means to say three types of people are involved. Number 1, elected members of both House of Parliament. Number one. Number two, elected members of the state legislature. Number three, elected members of the legislatures of union territories. So these are the three wings. They come together to elect the president of India. Then let us understand what are the qualifications for the post of president of India. See, he has some qualifications to become a president of India. Let us see what are the qualifications. Number one is he or she should not be member of any political party in previous 5 years. For the last 5 years, they have not identified with any political parties. But it is a rule. Normally, any person who is elected as President of India is belong to one or other political parties. Anyhow, in procedure wise, there is a class. Number two qualification. He or she should not have crossed the age of 65 at the time of his election. So he should not have crossed 65 at the time of his election. Okay. Number three qualification, only one term to be fixed. A person can become president only once. Second time is ineligible. And fourth qualification, he or she should not have faced any criminal cases anytime in his or her life. That means to say, in his entire life, he has not faced any, he has not faced any criminal cases against him. Number fifth qualification, he or she should have minimum university degree. This is a new amendment made, and they are fixed education qualification for the president. Okay, so he or she should have minimum university degree. Suppose it was if the minimum university degree was fixed for prime minister, please remember Mr. Devegowda wouldn't have become prime minister of India because he had only a diploma in engineering. Okay, so for prime minister, no education qualification is fixed, whereas for president, the degree minimum university degree is fixed. Okay, this is one of the new amendment made. Okay, then some additional rules should be formed to avoid criminals trying to become president. This lesson learned by seeing many criminals becoming MPs and MLAs. So why these clauses have been included? Because many criminals are entering into politics. To avoid them from becoming the president of India, so there are certain rules framed to keep the criminals away from the elections. Okay. Then coming to these are the qualifications we have discussed. Five. What are the minimum qualifications to be become a president? Minimum qualifications. Number one is one should be a citizen of India. If you want to become president of India, you must be a citizen of India. Number two, at least 35 years of age. You should have crossed at least 35 years of age. You should have crossed at the time of election. And third, she or he must not be holding any office of profit. That means he should not having any industry, any office, NGOs, non-government organizations, profit-making organizations like factories, companies, institutes. No, he is not supposed to have in his name. And fourth minimum qualification, he or she should be qualified for election as member of Lok Sabha. So what are the minimum qualifications fixed for the to become a parliament member? Similar kind of qualifications one should have. So these are the important four important minimum qualifications to become a president of India. Then coming to the what is the tenure of president? Okay, the president is elected for a period of 5 years. Here, all especially the prime minister, MLA, okay, except MLCs. Okay, MLCs they will be having 6 years, whereas the tenure of president is 5 years. Okay, then let us understand what are the powers and functions of president. What is his powers and functions? Okay, all the executive powers of union are vested by Article 53 in the president. His or her powers include executive functions, legislative functions, financial functions, judicial functions, and emergency functions. He has vast powers, that is five types of functions he exercises and he has. I repeat once again, the powers and functions of President of India include executive functions, legislative functions, financial functions, judicial functions, and emergency functions. Is her powers are vast, but is not answerable to any authority in India. Is not answerable any authority in India. Okay, and is her powers are divided in two parts. Number one, powers during normal times and powers during emergency types. Emergency during the emergency. There are two types of powers he has. Number one, powers during normal times. Okay, these are always exercised by the president. And the second type of powers is emergency powers. These are extraordinary nature and are exercised in case of war, internal rebellion, constitutional breakdown, or financial crisis. So, emergency powers are vested with the President of India. Under four conditions, he can impose president rule. Under that, number one is war. If there is a war between the countries, he can declare emergency, or internal rebellion. That means there are some issues in which say, the internal rebellions may occur. Just example, see what has happened in West Bengal after elections, after results. Many people have died. There is a clashes between the two political parties, right? If that is the case, that was observed only one state. If similar kinds of situation observed across the country, then that is called internal rebellion. During internal rebellion also, president can impose president rule. And the third condition is constitutional breakdown. Constitutional breakdown means but nobody is respecting constitution or everybody breaching the constitutional norms, rules, regulations, then the president of India can impose president rule. And fourth important situation under which president can declare emergency is financial crisis. That means a financial crisis means there is no money to pay the salaries of the government employees, and there is a financial corruption involved. That is the case. So these are the four important occasions in which the President of India can impose president rule or the emergency. Okay. Now the question is, I said, is president powers cannot be and is not answerable to anyone in India, right? So, as I said, but the question is whether the President of India be removed. Okay, the answer is yes, it can be removed, but under rare conditions. Okay, the removal of president from his office is called impeachment. I repeat once again, removal of president from his office is called impeachment. ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದನ್ನ ದೋಷಾರೋಪ ಅಂತಾರೆ. ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದನ್ನ ದೋಷಾರೋಪ ಅಂತಾರೆ. ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದನ್ನ impeachment ಅಂತಾರೆ. Okay, so let us understand the procedure for removal of president of India from his office. Okay, the only ground of president removal is violation of the constitution. If the president violates the constitution, that is the first step, he can be removed. The process of impeachment can be initiated by not less than one fourth of the total membership of any of the House of Parliament. If you want to initiate action against him, there should be 25% of the elected representatives of the any House of the Parliament, either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, should initiate the action. Okay, then these members give 14 days notice to the president informing him or her of their intention to impeach him or her. If the charges against the president are approved by the said house by two-third majority, that means 66% of the members approve is initiate action, and if you approve the mistake made by the president, then first stage is over. First stage is over. See, the first step is 25% of the elected representatives of the any house should initiate the action. Number first step, and the action is approved by 66% of the house. Then This procedure is called step 1. The step 2 is the charges thus framed are then investigated by the other house of the parliament. If the charges are initiated by the Lok Sabha, then that is investigated by the Rajya Sabha. If the Rajya Sabha is initiated the action against President of India, then Lok Sabha has to investigate it. Okay. Uh, the charges thus framed are then investigated by the other house of parliament. The president may defend himself or self either personally or through his lawyers. If that is the case, if the charges are initiated against him, he can come and he can argue that he has no mistake, or he can through his lawyers he can proceed and he has to prove that he has not made any mistake. Okay, and if that proved, his mistake is proved, his violation is proved, and breaching the constitution is proved, then he may be removed. The entire process is called impeachment. Then coming to the vice president, okay, we have vice president also. Okay, what are the qualifications for the post of vice president? Number one is ERC should be citizen of India. Second one, not less than age of 35 years. Third qualification minimum, she or he should not qualify to be elected as member of the Rajya Sabha. Fourth, he or she should not have any office of profit. It is similar to minimum qualifications of the President of India. Okay. Election of the Vice President. How he is elected? Overall involved. Okay. The Vice President is elected by the members of both House of Parliament, both the Parliament and Rajya Sabha members and Lok Sabha members put together. They elect the Vice President of India. Okay. Then coming to the tenure of the President, Vice President. Tenure of the Vice President. The Vice President is elected for term of 5 years. For term of 5 years. Then coming to what are the functions of the Vice President? Okay. The Vice President is ex officio chairman of the Rajya Sabha. Who will be the Vice President? He will be the chairman of the Rajya Sabha. He exercises all the functions of presiding officer. He presides over the Rajya Sabha, maintains discipline and decorum in the house, and conducts decision division on bills and motions. Since he is not a member of Rajya Sabha, he doesn't participate in voting in the house. However, he is entitled to casting vote in case of tie. If the same 50-50, if the 50% are favoring the rule, 50% against the rule, if that is the case, he can cast his vote. Okay, if there is a tie. Okay. Then third important organ in this class is we have understood the President of India, Vice President. Then coming to the Union Council of Ministers, Council of Ministers. The President being the constitutional head, the real executive power of the Union is exercised by Council of Ministers. Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister is the real authority. The Council of Ministers include the Prime Minister, the Cabinet Ministers, the Minister of State. The total strength of the Council of Ministers cannot be more than 15% of the strength of Lok Sabha or of Vidhan Sabha in case of states. That means to say, the ministers, both state ministers and cabinet ministers, should not cross 15% of the total strength. Suppose in Karnataka, see we have 224 seats, MLA seats, right? 15% of the 224. As far as in Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha is concerned, as you know, 545 seats, 545 MP seats. Out of that, only 15% of the strength can become ministers or cabinet ministers, state ministers, and prime minister. Okay. Then coming to the prime minister is appointed by the president. The other ministers are appointed by the president on the advice of the prime minister. All the even the prime ministers also uh, selected by the president, whoever enjoys maximum support of parliament members. Okay. Then the ministers are appointed by the president on the advice of the prime minister. All the senior ministers and central ministers are appointed by the president on the advice of the prime minister. Prime ministers, whoever may be, the prime minister indicates, he will become the minister. So the minister is appointed by the president on the advice of the prime minister. Okay. The Council of Ministers remain in the office only so long as the Prime Minister is satisfied with their work and wants to remain them. So the ministers, the cabinet ministers and state ministers not stable. So they can be changed. They can be changed portfolios and sometimes removed, sometimes upgraded. Okay, based on the nature of work. Okay. The cabinet holds frequent meetings under the chairmanship of the prime minister. All important matters are discussed and decisions taken in the cabinet meetings. All policies are formulated by the cabinet as a whole. Okay. Then coming to what are the functions of the cabinet or functions of these ministers, council of ministers. Okay. There are six important functions of the council of ministers. Number one, policy formulation. What does it mean? Policy formulation. The cabinet is a policy formulating organ. It considers all national and international problems and takes policy decisions in relation to all national and international problems. Second function is control over the administration. Control over administration. The normal and traditional function of the cabinet is to implement the laws enacted by the parliament and to control the national administration. So control over the administration, entire government administration controlled by the council of ministers. Third function is legislative functions. Formulation of policies or rules. Legislation means formulation of the policies or rules is called legislative. That's called legislative function. And fourth function is financial powers. Financial powers. It is responsible for all the expenses and has to find revenue to finance the expenditure. They should understand what is the amount required, how the amount is to be collected. So these are all called financial powers. Fifth important function is power of making appointments. The council of ministers, okay, they have power of making appointment. What kind of appointments? President makes a large number of appointments. Most of these appointments are actually made on the recommendation of the cabinet. Whomever cabinet recommends, those will be nominated as the members. Okay, the appointments like ambassadors, high commissioners, governor of states, judge of Supreme Court, members of the UPSC by the cabinet. So these are the members appointed by the council of ministers. And then sixth one is the miscellaneous functions. So apart from these things, whatever powers comes, that is called miscellaneous functions. Okay. Then last part of my class is the Prime Minister of India. Okay. The most important person in the government of a country is the Prime Minister. The office is created by Article 74 of the Constitution. He is appointed by the President on the advice of the majority of the members of Parliament. So the President is elected by the President of India on the advice of the majority of members of Parliament. Okay. Then coming to the functions of the Prime Minister, he controls the entire administration. He is head of the government. His functions are enormous. His powers are real and vast. The Prime Minister is the central figure in the formation, existence, and termination of the cabinet. The first function of the Prime Minister is to constitute his cabinet. The constitution requires the president to appoint ministers on the advice of the prime minister. All the ministers are appointed by the president of India on the advice of the prime minister. The prime minister keeps an eye on the working of all the departments. He can reshuffle his cabinet to make it more effective. He can drop some ministers, change portfolios of others, and can bring in new ministers. He presides over the meetings of the cabinet, fixes their agenda, and conduct proceedings. His voice is the most important in policy formulation. Discussions in the cabinet meetings are kept secret. The Prime Minister plays an important role in the management of foreign affairs. All foreign affairs are maintained by the Prime Minister. Second important function is all important appointments are made on the recommendations of the Prime Minister, like Supreme Court judge, High Court judge, governors, ambassadors, UPSC chairman, UPSC members, election commissioners. These are the major appointments done by the prime minister and the advice of the council of ministers. And third important function is the prime minister act as a link between president and council of ministers. So is the prime minister is the link between president and council of ministers. If some ministers not performing well, the president of India will not talk directly to the ministers. The president of India call prime minister and instruct that particular minister is not up to the mark. Right? Okay. The prime minister is leader of the parliament, mainly the Lok Sabha. He is the leader for the entire Lok Sabha. So these are the powers and functions of the Prime Minister of India. So in this class, we have only 4 study questions. Number 1, what are the qualifications for the post of President of India? You have to write both minimum qualifications and other qualifications to become a President of India. Second study question is, write the powers and functions of the President of India. What are the powers and functions? Okay, you have to write enlist all 6 powers and functions, like executive power, financial powers, okay, and policy formulation, okay, emergency powers, okay. These are all the major important powers and functions of the President of India. Third question, explain the functions of the cabinet. There are 6 major readings. You have to write that. So then last question, fourth question in this chapter is, write the functions of Prime Minister. Write the functions of the Prime Minister. Friends, today we have discussed the Union Executive consisting of President of India, Vice President, Council of Ministers, Prime Ministers, their powers and functions. Okay. If you have any queries, any clarifications, ask me. Friends, students, hello, hello.
Yes, sir.
ಏನಾದ್ರು
Yes, sir.
ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಇದೆಯಪ್ಪ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ? ಪ್ರೈಮ್ ಮಿನಿಸ್ಟರ್, ಪ್ರೆಸಿಡೆಂಟ್, ಕೌನ್ಸಿಲ್ ಆಫ್ ಮಿನಿಸ್ಟರ್ಸ್, ಮತ್ತೆ ಇಫ್ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಎನಿ ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಆಸ್ಕ್ ಮೀ. No questions? Girls,
sir.
boys, any question regarding this class?
No, sir.
Okay. Gavisida?
Sir,
Gavisida Patil. Okay. If there are no
Sir.
questions, ಏನಾದ್ರು ಕ್ವಶನ್ಸ್ ಇದೆಯೇನಪ್ಪ?
ಏನಿಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ ಸರ್.
Okay. If there are no, even if they can, you can put questions on chat box, no problem. I will answer, no problem. ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಚಾಟ್ ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಕಿದ್ರೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಆನ್ಸರ್ಸ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಓಕೆ. If there are no queries, I will stop my class at this stage. Okay. Thank you. ಗೌಸಿದ ಅವಾಗ ಅಟೆಂಡೆನ್ಸ್ ತಗೊಳಪ್ಪ ನೀಟಾಗಿ.
ತಗೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ ಸರ್, ಇವಾಗ ತಗೊಂಡೆ ಸರ್.
ಸರಿ. ಓಕೆ. ಓಕೆ, ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು. ಅಂಡ್ stay home, stay safe. Please Take care of yourself. Now it's rampanting. The COVID is rampanting in Bangalore and other major districts. Okay. Take care. Be safe. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You also, sir. Be safe.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your,
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
thank you for your concern.